And with that, again, welcome. And Father Michael Piovane is our speaker this morning, and he will be speaking on being spiritual, to be or not to be. And Michael, welcome. We're looking forward to it. And you can take it away and explain what you're doing today.
First of all, I welcome all of you. And one of the first things we'd like to do is just stop for a moment and call on the Spirit, the Great Spirit, and ask the Spirit to be our guide, our teacher, our mentor, our friend as we gather, to let the Spirit's wisdom be upon us in our sharing and to help us to grow in our relationship with one another and with our God and with ourselves. Amen. The whole topic of spirituality is really kind of a broad and even diverse concept today. And as I think most of us know, 1/4 of people in the United States, according to Pew Research Center, belong to a group known as spiritual but not religious, or have no religious affiliation at all, and even tend not to believe in a divinity or in God. So we're in an evolving situation. In the past, we all had a basic idea of what it meant to be spiritual. Today, it has become individualistic, actually. But before we get into this whole concept of spirituality, I'm reminded of a close friend of mine who was a spiritual friend and mentor for me. And one of the things that he would always say to me, especially when we would start getting into deep conversations or, life questions and issues, he'd always remind me, don't take yourself too seriously. Be able to play with ideas. Don't defend them to the point where, you're in a, position where you just have to defend everything rather than being open to new possibilities, new patterns, new ways of thinking, of attitudes towards things. And he used the word play because he wanted to allow me in particular to use my creativity and imagination when addressing a serious issue. And so with that in mind, I'd like to begin this discussion because obviously I borrowed the theme from William Shakespeare in Hamlet, to be or not to be. That is the question. But you can have fun with that, as various people have. And I'd like to share with you how some people have been able to take a creative, imaginative look at to be or not to be. So here is the first one. And I hope you can enjoy the bees. Notice there are 2 bees. And I just love the simplicity of this cartoon. It really is neat. But the next one is kind of even a little more interesting. To be or not to be. It's always about you, isn't it? And we seem to be in a society that is very individualistic and is always asking the question about how does this affect me? What does it mean for me? And as we go along, we need to understand that it not only affects me, what happens in life, but other people. And as the phrase to be or not to be in Hamlet raises, it really is asking the question to live or to die. Hamlet is musing about how difficult life is with its ups and downs. And he's also looking at what if he were to die? What were the uncertainties of death, and not sure of what was ahead in the dying experience. So these are heavy issues that Shakespeare raises, but they're related to our topic today. And I'd express today's topic in these terms: to be spiritually alive or to be spiritually lifeless. That is the question. Some people believe they are spiritual. Some people do not. And when we're raising the whole concept of spirituality, we need to remember there are many views today, and it is a broad, diverse concept. There was a study that was looking at what it means to be spiritual in the United States. And it was asking a rather simple question of what does it mean to be spiritual, and how does an individual visualize or verbalize their own spirituality? And this study came out of Fetzer Institute in Michigan. And one of the things that they did was they had focus groups that they conducted. They used interviews with certain people. And then they had a study, a cross-section of people 18 and older in the United States. And I'd like to just share with you a little bit of what some individuals said spirituality meant to them. First of all, to get an idea of the diversity that may be out there, as well as the individuality that comes through. And this is the first one. Nancy is 54 years old. She self-identifies as very spiritual, moderately religious, and she identified as an Episcopalian. But to her, it's about connecting with Source. And that's an interesting phrase, with Source. And what she calls Source is God. And it's a desire to connect with the Source at all times through everyone. Kind of interesting concepts that are expressed there. The next person, Daniel, who is on the younger end of the spectrum, 20, considers himself very spiritual, but not at all religious. And his concept is, I talk to God a lot. That just means praying a lot, talking, having a connection with God. Notice the two of them have used the word connection. And both of them seem to be talking about a personal relationship. Just to note those 2 points. And then 2 others, we have Jay, who again is on the younger side, who considers himself moderately spiritual and religious. He calls himself Christian, but non-denominational. And his concept of spirituality is when you get that feeling of peace or something greater than yourself, and you get that aura around you, a sort of peace. Kind of very interesting, the whole concept of peace and something greater. And the last person would like to share their thought is Deborah, who is 56, moderately spiritual, but not religious at all. And fly fishing is my spiritual place. Loves to be in nature, loves to be fly fishing. Great spot. And it's really interesting when you read some of the other research studies. Nature is one of the key elements that spiritual but not religious people identify as a powerful source of connecting with the spiritual. But this is where I would like to lead to ask you to share. Those were just some examples of ordinary people. One of the things I'm staying away from right now are going to spiritual writers or mystics. Staying with us as ordinary people, normal people who are trying to live a spiritual life. And what does that mean to you? And how do you visualize or verbalize your spirituality? And so this is a time for some sharing, if you would like to. I do have some other things that I can share with you, but I think it's more important to get a good discussion going about your views and some of the questions or issues or concerns that you may have about spirituality. So using the raising your hand, John will moderate and track people and allow you to share your thoughts.
Michael, I'll need you to stop sharing your screen so I can see people.
There we go.
There we go.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. And the rains have descended upon us here. Who would like, is there someone who wants to share?
Amanda has her hand raised.
She does. I don't see it here on.
Just her
Oh.
actual hand.
Okay, I won't see people doing that because I don't have a full screen, but go, Amanda, go ahead.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Michael, just asking that question, one word came to me and it feels totally right. And it's soaked, S-O-A-K-E-D. That is when you say, what is your definition of spirituality or something? It's being soaked. It's being soaked with God and all that, the other things, the connection part and all that is all part of that. But it is being soaked. I don't know how to better explain it for me. That's what it is for me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
And Steve, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, I might have a hangover from being a Southern Baptist and all that, but a lot of the people that I know on Facebook say things like, "Dear God, be with me today as I had this test," or "Dear God, be with my friend as they're going through a tough time." And I haven't had any sort of specific teaching or anything, but it seems to me that God is there all the time, and we're just the ones that don't pay attention to God. And it's not that we're being bad; we're just walking down the grocery aisle trying to pick up a loaf of bread and are not necessarily thinking of it. But to me, it's making sure that I remember and feel the presence of and converse with God on as the day goes by, just not when I need a special help during a test. So that's, to me, being spiritual is constantly recognizing. And if I have a thought of, "Oh, I can't believe they cut me off," then, talk to God about it and say, "Yeah, why did that make me a little irritated? It's not about me." So constantly having that conversation with source.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Anyone else? And Mike, go ahead.
Well, I think Judy had her hand up first. Didn't you, Judy?
It was not raised on Zoom.
Oh,
Go ahead,
okay.
Mike.
No, I'll go. Then I think for me, it is connection. It's also it's going past the ego, beyond ego, past the skin we carry around, this little self we carry around the world, but a connection with the nature, with other people. That's God to me.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Judy, if you were raising your hand physically on the screen, that's fine. Maybe not. Michael, as we wait for someone else to come in, I resonated with especially the fly fishing, and Nikki Seeger would as well. But for me, it's as I was growing up in high school, I would consider myself as not religious at that point, but very much connected with God, being out in the woods, in the water, and still nature is a strong call to me to experience God in nature, in all of God's creation. And it reminds me of the early Celtic Christians who were immersed in God right from the time of birth. They were surrounded by those who prayed, and they recognized that God was always present. They had prayers for milking the cow, for planting the seeds in the field, for harvesting, for being out and fishing, but a very practical application of God's presence. And so in terms of spirituality, it is the recognizing in whatever manner works for me, the presence of God and relationship with God, this being connected has been the term used. And Jane, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I guess I don't know that I can express this, but I'll try. For me, God is compassion and benevolence, and that's certainly not the image I was taught or grew up with. God was, I don't know, some hyped up super Santa Claus keeping track of everything we did bad or something. And so as an adult, I reject that. And God is compassion and benevolence, and God made us in his image and likeness. And so to be spiritual is to try to keep that in mind and try to live that as best I can. I guess that's the best I can verbalize it.
Thank you, Jane. I think you did a very nice job of verbalizing it.
Yes.
Rita, you're up.
Actually, David has had his hand up and down, so if Dave wants to go first, and then I'll go.
Okay, that'd be great.
Thanks, Rita. For me, it's walking the talk. Ever since a kid, I've been involved at the church. It's a positive reinforcement of formally what we've been taught through church, but it's also being taught through life, knowing the way God wants us to live. You see so many examples of that. It's positive reinforcement, but they say the best lesson is learning from mistakes. And you see the way other people react and you go, no, that's a lesson. The day-to-day stuff, when you take a look at what's happening in the world today, I find that my spirituality has, the level is raised because of the circumstances and what's happening to people. But for me, it's walking the talk, knowing the way that God would want us to live and doing the best that you can to live that way and to be an example for others.
Thank you very much, Dave. And Rita, you're next.
I just noticed that my brother's hand's up, and so I'll cede to him, and then I'll go.
Oh, you're so generous. Okay, Ron, go ahead.
A subtle way of saying I'm older. I sort of like to resonate with Brother John's comment, and I think as I get older, I become more conscious of understanding, celebrating, and being engaged in the sacrament of the moment. And I think sometimes that really requires not only an inner reflection, but being sensitive what's around you. And that sacrament is blessed. I'll yield to my sister.
Right, thank you.
It's got to be the first time in 76 years he's done that. So, actually, we grew up in a household. We had a mother who was the epitome of both being religious and being spiritual. But it took me a long time to understand what the difference was between those two things. And in my own spiritual journey, I'm finding that being spiritual has to do with how God is revealing himself to me all the time. And being religious is about how I want to reveal myself to God. And that has become less important to me than being truly aware of how often God wants to reveal himself to me. So it's not really all about me. I'm suddenly getting that lesson. It's not about me at all. It's really about the great one, the holy one, whatever name we want to call that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. And we have iPad up. I don't have your name and you're muted right now. You need to unmute.
She doesn't know how to unmute, Brother John. She's been fussing with it the whole time. So could you help her unmute?
Yes. If you look at the bottom, hover your arrow down at the bottom of your screen, your Zoom screen, and you should see a little microphone over on the left. Click on that and that should unmute you.
I think I got
There you
unmuted.
go.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I probably muted you if you weren't speaking up. I keep people muted unless they're been asked to speak. So go ahead.
I really hadn't. I was interested in attending because I wanted to know spirituality versus religious. And a couple of people said things that made me feel like I got a little inkling of what spirituality meant to me is when I've had these inklings, like standing in line at the grocery store. And there's a mother behind me with a screaming baby who's obviously maybe 3 weeks old. And she's trying to unload this heaping basket of groceries. She's trying to comfort her baby in one arm and unloading the groceries with the other. And I say to her, why don't you comfort your baby and I'll unload your groceries? That to me that's like, I just heard God telling me, not like, Janet, do this, but that I just felt moved that this mother was going crazy trying to comfort her baby and standing there with this heaping cart of groceries. That's one example. But it's when you see somebody has a need and you step in and take care of it, then that's when I feel spiritual. I've always been what I think is religious. I've had experiences of praying with others and having God answer the prayer like immediately. If I pray alone, it doesn't seem like I get in touch with him, or if I'm reading my Bible study, trying to if I'm following a certain Bible study for women or whatever it is, I don't feel spiritual. But if I'm with a group of women doing that, I feel the love of God coming down on our group. Is that understandable? I don't know if I'm being clear. I don't know if anyone else has had an experience like that, but I feel more spiritual when I'm with a group of people. And I feel more spiritual when I get down on my knees and pray, not when I'm just walking along the street and saying, God, don't let it rain before I get home from my walk. Like today.
I think community is a very important part of our relationship with God. We're meant to be in community.
It always has been for me.
And community may not be sitting inside the church. It may be other ways of being in community for a person. But I think
I do like being inside the church, but I don't feel spiritual in church. I feel like I'm celebrating God because I know he loves me and he's in my life. And I'm grateful for that. When I feel spiritual is when I see a need, or like somebody asked me to pray with them because they're feeling, well, at 9/11, I was a therapist, and every patient I had that day came in and wanted to pray before they started their session. I felt spiritual then.
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And Marion, you have your hand raised.
As I keep listening to people, a word keeps coming back to me again and again. And the word is attitude. Attitude for me is the place from which you look at life. Right? It's your perspective. It's your lens on life.
Your what?
So the lens on life. And in both cases, spiritual and religious. I'll distinguish between the two, but spiritual is that lens through which you see God's role in all of creation. He is source. He is the one towards which we are moving. He is the all in all. When you see that individually and then acted out in your life, you're being a spiritual being. I think religion refers to an attitude within an organization. The church is an organization. And so when we participate in that, our attitude is being supported by an organization with certain structure, doctrines, dogmas, rituals, traditions, etc. I think underneath both is moving beyond the small self or the ego and having an attitudinal shift of moving into the higher self or into union with the divine, toward the one who holds us all in oneness with distinctions, but no differences. And so thank you for this discussion because it focused me on the transitions of attitude along the way. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Marian. Is there anyone else who'd like to raise their hand, speak?
Yeah, Dave.
Go ahead.
Dave has his hand back up.
Yep.
I've been a licensed lay reader for almost 45 years. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I'm a celebrant at funerals for people that have no affiliation with a church. And it is, putting it bluntly, it is one heck of a challenge. I don't know the people. I don't know the deceased. I'd say for 85% of the services that I do. One of the questions I pose to people when they tell me, well, we want a service, but we don't want any religion. I had one lady say, I don't want any mention of God, Jesus, or heaven in the service. And I told her she had the wrong person. I mean, you know, you stand up there and tell the joke because what's left. But I ask people if they think that the deceased was spiritual or was religious. And they go, not really. So I ask them in one word or a short phrase, describe for me the person that passed. And they go through a whole series of things. Sometimes there's multiple people from the family are on the call, and they go through a whole bunch of stuff. And then I ask them, do you see, from your limited knowledge, do you see those qualities in the Lord? Well, yeah, I guess so. So then I try and bring them back to say, that person that we're talking about may not have been a religious or spiritual person, but did they live life according to the way that God wanted them to live? And you can almost see the wheels in their mind turning because suddenly they got it. So I say that in my eulogies that I prepare for these people that I have no idea who they are, that the person may not have been a religious person, but when you take a look at their qualities and the qualities of Jesus, there's a parallel. And it's a fine line to walk because some people they don't want any religion. We want a service, but we don't want any religion. So basically what I've done is I take the funeral service and I just change words around. They're getting the service, but I have to modify it. So it's very interesting to come from what I think is a strong spiritual faith base that I have to talk to these people and walk that fine line to get them to feel comfortable with a service that's going to take place.
All right. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, I'd like to make two comments, if it's okay. One, notice the diversity of language that we've used to express spirituality. Each one has a value and a worth and expresses a component, a factor, an element of something that's larger, bigger than all of us. It's sort of like looking up at the night sky when you have no lights distracting you from seeing the multitude of stars that are there. And each one is bright and each one is revealing something of the universe right there and then. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about what each of you have shared about your concept, your idea of spirituality, because it's real and it's valuable and it's part of something much bigger than ourselves. That's the one point that I'd like to make. And the other point is that our spirituality changes. Notice the number of people who talked about how they have grown in their awareness of what it means to be spiritual. And that's something that is never ending. We're constantly learning and experiencing God's presence in our life in different ways. And one of the things that Dave had raised that I think is really intriguing today is a lot of people do not like to use traditional language to talk about spirituality. People are using different words and different concepts. But one of the things that absolutely amazes me is turn the television on, listen to commercials that are using phrases or words that used to have religious, spiritual connotations. Use this product and you will be peaceful. You will have joy. You will be wholesome. You will be transformed. It's really intriguing because people are really looking for this. And one of the things that we're being invited to is to really listen to what people are saying. And I know one of the things that concerns me is when we keep making distinctions between spiritual and religious, we're making things, I think, artificial, because they can be integrated, the two of them. But because religion has had a bad name of late because of various circumstances, and people do not like organized faith, organized religion. But people are yearning for community, for belonging, and for support. And those are the things I believe that we need to be paying attention to and really learning not to say spirituality is one thing over another, but really listening to what the person is experiencing in their own life about whether they call it God, that experience God, the divine, energy, light. Because remember how John's gospel begins. In the beginning, it takes us right back to creation and the beginning of everything that God created good. And I'm going to stop because I see Suzanne has her hand raised and would like to keep getting your input on this topic.
Go ahead, Suzanne. You need to unmute yourself.
Gotcha.
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm sort of really sort of simple the way I have this grouped. And for me, there's a big connection between my spirituality and my religion. I think all life is spirit. And for me to get, I mean, Marian touched on it about the institution of the church. To me, religion is man-made. We've got God out there, and we've got God with or without religion. And so, but for me, my religion helps deepen my spirituality for me. I can have a connection with God when I go for a walk in the morning. I don't wear earbuds. I just like to hear the birds. And it's really kind of a grounding. It was really good. I started it a lot through COVID when I was working from home during the pandemic. And, but for me, it's the religion is man-made, but I find the practice of being an Episcopalian enhances my spirituality and helps me in that connection to God, with God. But I don't need the religion necessarily. It does help me, but I feel someone said something about, are we paying attention? Wayne said something one time that I had written down that said, pay attention to where the Holy Spirit is and then participate.
Mhm.
And that to me has always stuck with me. So where is the Spirit in life? And then how do I participate? So it gets back to what, I'm sorry, the woman iPad said about helping a woman, feeling a connection to helping this young woman with a baby or whatever. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. So they're connected to me, for me.
Thank you, Suzanne. And Janet, do you want to? Need to unmute. Janet, you need to unmute. There you go.
I've never had just my iPad number come up, and for some reason my name isn't coming up. So when I tried to enter my name, the meeting, so forgive me, but I'm iPad number, whatever it says
That's okay.
for today.
Did you have something you wanted to share?
No, I'm just, well, Suzanne, what she just said, thumbs up to that, like her emoji says. I think God is always all around us. And whether people say, I don't believe in God, or I do believe in God, he still loves us. And I think it wounds him to hear us say, I reject him. And I think I am spiritual in that I always am, not always, but there are many times in my life I've come face to face with things that I feel like I'm being led by God. I've been led by God to that situation. And the person that was leading the funeral things, the way he talked about how he got people around to at least looking at a spiritual aspect of dying, their loved one going, moving forward, dying, going to heaven, going to the upper room, whatever they say, whatever they are talking about. But you always have to listen to what that person is saying and respond to them at their level. And I had the privilege of being brought up in a family that was spiritual and religious. And I never got the religious part until about when my brother died about 20 years ago. And I was very angry at God for my brother dying because of Agent Orange in Vietnam. And it took me a couple of years to get over that. And I'm grateful he did get me over it, because I missed having that feeling inside me that I don't have to be alone.
Right. Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your sharing.
I don't know if that made sense or not.
Yes, it did. And we have David has his hand up, and then Mike after David.
You know, the thing is, I sit and listen. We've got what, 20 some people on here. I think we're all spiritual, we're faith-based. But the big challenge when we take a look at things today is the thing that got us to have those feelings. There's a whole multitude of generations out there that there's a disconnect. And I think the big challenge for us all is we've had a nice chat because I think we're all on the same page for the most part. But the big challenge is all those people out there that don't have this kind of feeling. How do we get to them? How do we, this is probably the wrong way to say it, how do we sell faith-based spirituality to a whole new series of generations? And I you know, that's kind of one heck of a question to put forward. I don't know what the answer is.
All right, thank you, Dave. And Mike, hang on for a minute. I've got a text that Zerby's been trying to get in on the conversation, and I don't see everybody when I'm handling this. So Zerby, if you want to come in, and then Mike will follow Zerby.
Okay, I'm trying to unmute here.
There you go. You're all set. No, now you muted yourself again.
Having problems with this today. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm not seeing everyone here, so I'm just going to talk to you, Brother John, because I can see you.
All right.
Yesterday, I picked up a book on my bookcase that I've wanted to read for a while. I think I got it at St. Boniface in our trading of books, but it's called Dakota, a spiritual geography. And I love this book. I've just read it half the night, and it's about creating your own spiritual geography. And the woman who wrote this compares land and space with a monastery and monks. It's a terrific book. Catherine Norris is the poet who has written this, and I'm going to find her other books because it really spoke to me, and it's the thing that spirituality does to me. It speaks to me. I know it's part of me. It crowds me. It takes over for me when I'm doing my artwork. And she speaks about living in the Dakotas, in South Dakota, which I had the privilege of doing as a high school student. And that is that flat plains, huge skies up to the stars, and that big sky world. And it's the quietness. It's that historic sea. And that's why I'm here in Sarasota, because I always have to be around water or a flat area so I can really see and appreciate the quietness and the meditative part of life. And so when I'm in my studio, it's me, but it's more than me. I definitely find I have a spirit there doing the work. I just have to allow myself to be part of it and to kind of move over. So I'm sharing that space. That's a lot easier than Zooming when I never know when to share space. But I can only say, when she is writing this, she says, look for your own geography. And that's how I feel about my own concerns with, I need space. I love the quietness. I love the openness to contemplate. I love being in nature because then I can just absorb what I need. I can walk, I can find places and thoughts. And I think we don't have enough of that. So for me, the spirit is such an important part of my life, to listen to others and just to appreciate what's there when we listen to the quiet. That's it.
Thank you. And one of her first book was called The Cloister Walk, about her experience with being amongst the monks and praying the Psalms. So thank you very much, Sorby. And Mike, you're up next.
Also,
Could I ask the name of the author?
Yes,
Catherine Norris. I don't know if you
Thank
can see that. Yeah.
So I think Dave's question about how do we connect with those who consider themselves non-religious is really the primary issue that faces mainline churches today, including St. Boniface. And that's what's really our primary goal, I think. So, and that what David exemplifies that in his service there, I think it was a very good example of that. But I'd also like to make a plug, if I could, for the Trinity and the feminine side of God, Sophia. We've talked about God being he, and I think there's a lot of she and feminine and love and compassion in God. And some of us grew up with a harsh kind of autocratic image of God, which is implanted on us. I think, there's a lot there. God is more than we can even imagine. And if God is everywhere, then God surely must be within us if we're just aware of that within our very selves. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. And Judy.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to get my 2 cents in here. So my spiritual journey, it began in the church as a child, of course, and only thing I knew about it or really grasped was that I was very happy when I was in the church. It was the happiest days of my life were spent in the church. And I went to 2 different churches. Half of the time we went to the Catholic Church and half of the time we went to the Lutheran Church, but I loved them both. When I got to college, I began to broaden my horizons. I got uncomfortable with, your church is better than my church, your doctrines are better than mine, your practices are better than mine. And I started to meet people from all over the world, and I got very fascinated with world religions. And that was what opened my eyes to spirituality. As I started to look at the doctrines and teachings of all the great world religions, and they all have great books, just like we have the Bible. They have amazing holy books, the Bhagavad Gita, the 108 volumes of the Kanjur and the Tanjur from Buddhism. These Hebrew documents, I mean, these are like Zoroastrianism. These are amazingly spiritual books and spiritual ways. And I just could not deal with that concept of yours is better than mine. And so I started to think about, what is the soul? What religions believe that animals that have souls? What religions don't? What religions believe that the soul is individual? And what religions believe that the soul is one huge concept? Where I really became comfortable, actually, it's so funny, with what is God, because my concepts of God were old and worn out. I can't humanize God. God is not human. My mind doesn't have the ability to even know what God really is. That's enlightenment. But in the 12-step recovery program, I heard in Al-Anon the concept of power greater than myself. That's all that I have to really grasp, a power greater than myself. All the great religions believe in it. They all feel it in different ways. And that's what I do. And God is with me. God does for me what I can't do for myself. Every challenge, every lesson that I have to grasp. And it doesn't matter. Don't get me wrong. I like taking the Eucharist, but I don't feel like the younger generations. I don't even know what faith-based spirituality is. Guys, it's a concept that's beyond me, because faith is, I remember Father Mann saying one time, faith is the belief that there is a sense of order to all that happens, whether you like the outcome or not. And so much of what happens in my life, I don't like the outcome, but I still have faith in a power greater than myself that will do for me what I can't do for myself. And that's all I need. That's all I need. And I think that's all the younger generation needs. And I have a lot of faith in them. They're finding it in nature. They're finding it in their fellow men. They're finding it in saving our planet. They're finding it a lot of places. So that's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you, Judy. Donna, hang on. I've got a text that says Amanda's been trying to get herself in here as well. So Amanda, if you want to come on, and then Donna will follow you.
Okay, I'm so happy for Mike and Judith's comments, because I hope you're here next month, because what you're saying is going to be examined more thoroughly in the teaching on the feminine face of God. And so I'm already roiling around in my mind how those two things that you've just said are going to dovetail with my thoughts. So stay tuned. That's all I want to say.
Thank you for the ad there, Amanda. And Amanda will be our speaker next month on the feminine side of God. Donna?
Hi, thank you, Brother John, and thank you, Father Michael. Michael Piovane, I'm curious if you think it might be a good idea for you to give a statement on linking today's discussion and the inclusion of spiritual, religious, and nuns. If you think it might be a good idea to link this discussion to the CST generally, for those who might not be familiar with what the CST leadership team is working toward.
That's a very good point, Donna. The Center for Spiritual Transformation is looking at ways to help to invite spiritual but not religious individuals, individuals who may have been searching or seeking for belonging or meaning and don't have a place where they can have that sense of support and community. And in doing that, though, one of the things that's really difficult, and Dave raised the question very well, how do we, attract the individuals who are non-religious or not affiliated with any denomination, or who have some spiritual inclinations but are not sure what to do with all of that. And that's where we're beginning to work to try to find venues for that to happen. One of the things that I think is important is there's an awful lot of research going on today about what is known as nuns, N-O-N-E-S, meaning they don't identify with any denomination or any religious affiliation, and they have a complex division of what people think and believe and trying to get to an awareness of how individual this is, that it's not that everybody can be lumped into one category. It's everybody has their own unique way of expressing what they believe and what matters to them. But one of the things that I know wanted to raise with you today, Pew Research Center has several different studies that they've done to help us understand what's going on with the non-religious. The Barna Group also is a group in California that tries to get a better understanding of Christianity and spirituality in particular. And then you have, I've just come across the Fetzer Institute that just put out a study in 2020 called What Does Spirituality Mean to Us? A study of spirituality in the US. And very interesting concepts and awarenesses that they raise. And the last one is the Earl Bacon Center for Spirituality and Healing in Minnesota, that again is raising, looking at studies on what is spirituality, what is spiritual, why is spirituality important, and 7 spirituality needs that we all share in common. There's a lot being done, but it is going to take us to get out of our ivory towers, whatever they are, whether that be an organization, a church, a mosque, a synagogue, I don't care what you want to call that. We need to be where people are. We need to find ways to be in the marketplace and where people work and where people are raising these questions, to be able to offer something that I think is extremely important. And that is, I come from a Christian tradition. And to me, that's the basis of my belief system. But when I went on a Native American quest, spiritual quest, one of the first people I came across was a Native American woman who was into pottery. And it was a wonderful experience of the spiritual nature of Native American understanding of creation. I mean, she brought us clay that she dug up from the earth. But when she handed it to us, she asked us to just hold it in our hands and to know we were holding Mother Earth. And it was sacred. For those of us who receive communion this way, it's the same concept. It's being aware of the sacredness of life. And she wanted us to have that understanding of how everything is sacred and everything is connected. But here was the important part of which she had to share. And that was, she said, you're going to have a lot of good experiences in the next 10 days. And each one may hit you at different levels. She said, when they do, take it in and let it become part of your belief system, of your value system. Do not become one of us. You don't have to become one of us to take the good that you are receiving from this other perspective, but let it be real for you here and now. And that has meant a lot to me, because any organized religion has a lot to offer us. Any spirituality program, New Age, they have something to offer us, but we need to listen, to understand, and to let it be real for ourselves. So I thank you all for your sharing this morning. This has been really enlightening for me, because we all are believers in the divine, in the holy, and we call on God in different ways. And that's not bad. That's actually good. As my wife constantly reminds me, diversity is a gift from God. Diversity is not meant to separate us. It's meant to help us enjoy the wonder of God's creation, of the beauty that is always around us. And actually, I would like to end today's presentation with one thought from Evelyn Underhill, who was a 20th century English spiritual writer, who I think is as important to understanding spirituality today as it was a century ago. And she has some wonderful things that she has written. And for her, spirituality is something that is meant to be, and I want to make sure I'm quoting her correctly, and that is that it should be practical, sane, wholesome, and holy. I love those words. Only one of them is a religious term, holy. All the others are wonderful qualities of spirituality. But let me pull up on the screen an image that she has shared about how God is really the source of our spiritual life, that it's really all about God working with us and us working with God. So excuse me a minute as I bring this up. Whoop, it's not coming. There we are. Sorry about that. I need to. It won't come.
Slideshow.
I got.
Go back, click on slideshow up at the top.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to it, and there's a screen in front of it, John. Well, you know what? I'm just going to go to it. So we have it. This is her quote. And God comes to the soul in his working clothes. I love that image. And brings his tools with him. The house of the soul is properly furnished. The cleaning materials are all there. The languors and difficulties of ill health, the frictions of uncongenial temperaments, the hard rubs of circumstances can leave us cleaner than before. Even the most painful effort is transformed by the knowledge that we are working to make our house what it is meant to be and can be, a habitation fit for the spirit now. That's from her book, the house of the Spirit. And it coincides with the original meaning of the word spiritual, which comes from the Latin spiritualitas, which is derived from the Greek pneuma, which means spirit, and simply stated, a spiritual person is a person with whom the Spirit of God dwells. God's Spirit dwells within each one of us. As someone said earlier, we are created in the image and likeness of God. We were created good, and the original blessing of God is that we should live a full, abundant life. And that as we journey through this life, we don't have to wait for heaven to enjoy life, because life is here and now, and may you be filled with an abundance of joy, peace, and love. I thank you for joining in this conversation. I thank you for the beauty of your sharing this day, and I ask God to continue to attract you, prompt you, move you into more and more awarenesses of God's love of you.
Michael, thank you so much. Dave has requested if it would be possible for you to send out links for the resources that you shared in terms of the various studies that have been done.
Yes, very definitely.
And that brings me, folks, to the idea that if you're not on our mailing list, go to our website, and I'm going to bring that up here in a second, and give us your name, and we'll keep you updated on what's coming up. And also Michael can use that to send out the links. So I'm going to share our upcoming attractions here. And you'll see that on April 9th, we have Amanda, who's going to be talking about the feminine side of God. Now on the 14th, we're going to be looking at spiritual ecology. Grace Riker will be our presenter on that. So down here, you'll see our website, and then our email as well at cst@bonificechurch.com. And again, thank you all so much for all of your sharing. And Michael, again, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Blessings to everyone.
God bless. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.